Hello, everyone. This is John Friedland, AVP of Business Development here at AGWS. Today, for AGWS University webinar series, we're going to be having Bob Harkins, our Vice President of Training at AGWS, as well as David Robertson, Executive Director and President of AFIP speaking. We're going to be videoing this live from AFIP corporate office there in Texas. So if you do have video enabled on your mobile devices or your laptops, desktops, you should be able to see both Bob and Dave there in Texas. They're going to both cover the preloading products or services. Is it legal or illegal? How to develop a dealership value statement, as well as cover a little bit on compliance checklists and dealer aid solutions. So at this point, I'm going to kick it off and hand it off to both Bob and Dave. Take it away, guys.
Thank you very much, John Friedland. Good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome to F&I Insights, your monthly webinar series. My name, once again, is Bob Harkins. I'm with the American Guardian Group of Companies. Joining me, of course, as John said, is Dave Robertson. Dave,
yes.
Dave is the Executive Director and President of AFIP, the Association of Finance and Insurance Professionals. You know, as John alluded to, normally when Dave and I are doing these workshops, and this is the 8th one, and AFIP, specifically Dave Robertson, has joined us on 5 of the 8, and typically we're standing in Chicago, really Warrenville, Illinois, our home office at the American Guardian Group of Companies. Obviously not able to do that from a travel standpoint, but the good news is, because I live in Arlington, Texas, and AFIP is located in Colleyville, Texas, just a stone's throw apart, we're able to put this together and be with AFIP. So instead of really Dave joining me, the truth is I'm really joining Dave at AFIP for our webinar today. So Dave, I want to thank you and your organization, specifically Shannon Robertson, and all the members of your team for putting this together and coordinating it with us as well. John introduced what we were talking about from a standpoint of the topics that we're discussing. And before we get into that, I want to yield to Dave. There we go. The topic's preloading products or services. Is it legal or illegal? How to develop a dealership value statement, an AGWSU/AFIP compliance checklist, and dealer aid solutions. Before we delve into that, though, because of the coronavirus situation that we're in and how it affects our business, the retail automobile industry, I'm going to yield to Dave to talk about that, give us an update with respect to that, and primarily with the cooling off period when we're selling products off-site as it relates to dealership. So Dave, you want to handle that if you would?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. You know, the world has changed. Now we're out consummating sales in somebody's home. So I want to talk today about the Ftc Cooling Off Period. Now, this is the federal regulation. Keep in mind that state laws in many states supersedes federal law. But let's go through what the federal government says relative to the cooling off rule. The rule applies to vehicle sale or lease in which the sales representative personally solicits the sale, including those in response to or following an invitation by the buyer and the buyer's agreement to offer a purchase that's made at a location somewhere other than the dealership. Now, there are certain situations that don't fall under the Ftc cooling off period. So let's listen to these. I'm going to go through them line by line. A sales transaction that is a result of prior negotiations at the dealership does not fall under the rule. To meet a bona fide personal emergency does not fall under the rule. A sales transaction made entirely online or by mail or telephone does not fall under the rule. A vehicle sold at a temporary location other than the dealership does not fall under the rule. Now, in the cases where it does qualify, let's talk a little bit about, in your case, if it applies, what standards you have to follow. vehicle sales qualifying as an add home or certain other location transactions requires the following. The seller to give the buyer a copy of the sales contract in the same language as the oral sales presentation that contains pertinent information regarding the transaction. You have to give them a document. Number two, a statement in bold 10-point type noting the right to cancel the sale prior to midnight the third business day after the transaction. You have to give copies of the notice to the customer, notice of the right to cancel or notice of cancellation. Now, when it comes to signing the contract on a cooling off period transaction where it applies, then you cannot assign that contract until midnight the fifth business day after the transaction was consummated. Now, what I have given you are the federal cooling off period standards. Now, what I want to do, because state law supersedes federal law, I'm going to give you my email address. And if you want a copy of what I just talked about, or you want to know what the state laws are as it relates to cooling off in your state, if we have that data, you can contact me and I'll send you the information back. So write this down. My name is Dave Robertson. My email address is the letters AFIP Dave@gmail.com. So if you're concerned that your state cooling off period is different than the federal standard, send me an email, and if we have that data, we'll send it right back. I'm going to turn you back over to Bob, and we'll get back now to our standard agenda.
Thank you very much, Dave. Very timely information and right on target with that. You know, Dave and I were talking earlier as we prepared for this that the 3 bullet points that you see on the screen, the preloading, the how to develop, and the compliance checklist, were all things that came from you from a request standpoint of the things that we did in fact cover today. So as I yield to Dave with this first one in just a few minutes, let me see how our color's working. As it relates to preloading, we're going to get into a bit of a definition of that. Basic definition and how we define it. Dave is going to expand upon that, but you know, preloading, as we know, obviously is the adding or including of the price of products on the vehicle being sold prior to the customer actually walking on the lot. So preloading products or services, the big question is it legal or illegal? I'm going to answer that in a couple of different ways right now as Dave gets started. Is it legal or illegal? We're going to see that the answer to that question is yes, but in reality, it's a yes, but. Whether it's legal or illegal depends upon how you do it, So what Dave is going to spend a lot of time on in the next few minutes is the legal or illegal and the how that you do it. How to develop a dealership value statement. Those of you that I've known for a lot of years, and there's a number of people I see that are joining us today that I've known since the 1990s from a training standpoint, whatever. But quite frankly, when I was referred to this, a value statement back in the 90s, we called it a base statement. And since the 90s in teaching and working with financial services managers, whatever, we kind of changed the title of it over the years to a DVS or dealership value statement. But basically, it's the same thing. And we talked about this in a couple of our webinars last year, but we were asked to recover a couple of things with it today. But the dealership value statement is really your F&I mission. It's your F&I mission or policy statement. Quite frankly, from a presentation standpoint, we're going to say that it becomes the foundation of your presentation. Also, I like to think of it, the dealership value statement, quite frankly, is really the DNA of your dealership. So, you know, why is that so important? You know, we talk about in class, both front end sales training and F&I, especially on the front end, whether they're coming in the store or not directly or everything done online, whatever, we're still typically having to address on the front side the 4 whys. Why your product, why your dealership, why buy now, and why buy me as the professional sales consultant. But now when we get into the F&I side and the turnover or referral to the financial services manager, we always talk about the fact, and you and I, we all know it's true, and that's the 3 questions that are on the mind of every customer. And those are questions that they never ask us, but that they're on their mind. And what are they? Question number 1, can I trust you? Keyword being trust. Question number 2, are you credible? keyword being credible. And number three, last but certainly not least, do you care? Do you really care? Do you care about me, my needs, and my situation? Or are you just trying to sell me something, or trying to meet my needs and situation as well? So that dealership value statement really kind of handles that. We found over the years, from a standpoint of F&I technique, statements to the sale, probably the best time to present that is after you've gone over the manufacturer's limited warranty with the customer, after you've talked about the remaining portion of the manufacturer's limited warranty with the customer, and then you get into that dealership value statement and talk about that and what you're really committed to as far as your store. We're going to spend some time on that, about our commitment here at our dealership is to do and conduct business the right way. I'm a poor speller. We spell right R-H-I-T-T. That has to do with your mission or policy statement and your commitment of how you do business in your dealership. RHITT stands for the 5 principles. What are they? Respect, honesty, integrity, transparency, and trust. Respect, honesty, integrity, transparency, and trust. So we incorporate part of that into our dealership value statement. And of late, the last year and a half or two, at a lot of stores I've worked with, they've tried to shorten this, and they have shortened it. And really, they're just doing the big 3. We now call it the heavy hitter. The big 3. Everything that we do from a financial standpoint is based on 3 principles. Folks will be happy to know those 3 principles are honesty, integrity, and transparency. We caution you, however, don't say it unless you mean it. Don't say it unless you mean it, because if you don't, they're going to find out about it pretty darn quickly. So the mission statement, the foundation, is really very important. After we talked about the manufacturer's limited warranty, before we do the menu introduction, and then last we've asked to repeat this. A portion of it from what Dave and I did really last month, and that's the American Guardian Warranty Services University / AFIP's compliance checklist and dealer aid solutions, and that's for stores that need help or maybe have never ever put together their requirement as it relates to the 3 rules: the safeguards rule, the red flags rule, and also the disposal rule as well. So we'll get into that a little bit later. With that, let's see if my clicker is clicking. I'm going to erase the red. There we go. So as I yield to Dave, legal or illegal, we know the answer is yes. Depends on how you do it. And Dave is going to get into these 7 bullet points: the Monroney label, the addendum sticker, hard ads and soft ads, what's the difference, why they care to properly disclose preloads, payment packing and UDAP/UDA app violations. Remember how we always talk about that? UDAP's been around for a long time. The FTC has UDAP statutes. Every state has UDAP statutes. But UDAP stands for Unfair and Deceptive Acts and Practices. Then along came Dodd-Frank. And as of January of 2011, they bought a vowel, added an A, and I call it UDA app, but that A stands for abusive. Unfair, deceptive, or abusive acts and practices. You know, whenever we talk to our good friend Terry O'Loughlin, many of you know Terry. Terry is the VP of training for Reynolds and Reynolds. Prior to that, of course, he was an attorney, and for a period of time, he was the assistant attorney general from the great state of Florida. But Terry always reminds us that we should really think about the UDAP test or standard of enforcement. And basically, it's the answer to this question. Here's what they look at. Does the activity or practice have the tendency or capacity to mislead a consumer? So as Dave goes through a lot of this, think about that word or lead. That word as it relates to the preloads of our products or services. Does the activity or practice have the tendency or capacity to mislead a consumer? That answer is overwhelmingly yes. Very possibly we have people coming into the store that we would rather not have visiting us. Best practice recommendation, Dave will talk about this and maybe even chat with you about the recent litigation he was involved in as an expert witness. And the recommendation is to think of from a standpoint of transparency and not misleading, talk with the customer about the BVO, which is the base vehicle only payment, and then with the preloads that they've agreed to as the VAO, that's the vehicle as being offered. So we're going to list the vehicle only and vehicles as offered payments in the first pencil. Very important to consider. And then last but not least, for a quick review, is the menu process and transparency. Things are clearly seen and easily understood. So Dave, with that, let's go.
You know, Bob, I really thought that's the way you spelled right down here in Texas.
That is how I spell it.
Very good.
But remember, I'm from Ohio.
Oh, there you go.
I'm from Ohio.
All right, the Monroney label, I don't think we're going to spend much time on that. That's the window sticker. Everybody knows what that is, and it's on every new car. Now, let's talk about the addendum sticker. And the point is, when we add products to the vehicle, either soft or hard ads, how do we display those to the customer? And the way you do that, the traditional way, is use an addendum sticker that goes on the window. Now, the used car rules says you can put other stickers on the vehicle as long as it doesn't conflict with the buyer's guide. So let's talk about our addendum sticker. And let's talk about hard ads and soft ads. And of course, a hard ad are those things that you add to the vehicle that become part of it. And a soft ad are those things like aftermarket products that don't become part of the vehicle, but an element of the transaction. Now, when we're talking about what do we want to put on the car when it's sitting on the lot, you like to stay with hard ads because those are products that add value to the vehicle. Because the significant first step is to get a customer to agree to buy the car. And so the more things I can put on there, and it varies by dealership. Some do none, some do a lot. Nitrogen for your tires, mud flaps. There's all kinds of things that they can add on a Windows sticker, an addendum sticker on that vehicle. But you have to then make a statement that this is what it is, this is how much it costs, and then it gets nebulous as to, is this required to purchase the vehicle or is it optional to the customer? And the dealer has to make a clear differentiation between, is nitrogen something that we put on every car and the sale is required to have it, or it is something the customer can take off. But either way, the entire concept of what's going to happen there, you have to name the product, its selling price, and what are the relationships between that product and the final sale. Is it required or is it something that the customer can take off? And we have to tell them that clearly in that addendum sticker. Now, Bob mentioned earlier about a lawsuit I just finished as an expert witness. But they had a novel idea, and I want to give it to you now verbally. If somebody wants it in writing, then you have my email address. We don't send anything out that's not reviewed by a lawyer. But what they did is once the customer settled on the car, then they included in the listing of what the customer would pay, the price of the vehicle, negative equity, whatever on the trade-in, taxes, title, license, all of those things. They would put a soft ad on there that represented an aftermarket product that had a penetration rate nationally of around 50%. So what we're talking about is service contracts, gap, and tire and wheel. And on a by case basis, in other words, the customer is buying a used pickup, maybe we'll put in a service contract. It could be on a new or used car. You know what? Gap would be a good idea. If it was a Mercedes or a Porsche, tire and wheel. And they would put it on there and include it in the representation of the numbers in working the deal. We're penciling the deal at this point. And it's a soft sell because if most customers buy it, or at least 50%, if the customer goes, you know what, I always buy that, let's keep it with the deal, then it stays with the deal. But at this point in the process, if the customer doesn't want it, there is no effort on the part of the dealership to sell these products. They're going to do that later on in the F&I office. But what they're saying is, Mr. Customer, you've been buying cars for a lot of years. Half you people buy service contracts or gap. We just want to put this in here if this is going to be part of your purchase to tell you what the car would cost with it. Now, you itemize the cost of it, but then you have to have a declarative statement that this product is optional and it can be taken off at the customer's choice. So you cannot infer that it's part of the deal. But it's identified, the dollar amount is there, you tell them what the car cost with it on there, and then you have to tell them what the car would cost if it's not on there. But it is fully transparent. Remember, the total concept of payment packing is transparency. Is the customer aware of what's in the price of that car as it relates to a specific item, gap, service contract, or whatever? Then when the customer, whether he buys it or not, it's mox nix at that point, when the sale is consummated, it goes to the F&I office, and then we get ourselves in a full disclosure of those products. Now, why is this important on properly disclosed preloads? The reason is it's a shady area on, is this really part of the deal or is it not? And you have to make a declarative statement, dealer policy, that if we put this product on there, it's clear to that customer that it is not incidental to selling the car. Keep in mind, if we don't sell the car, none of this stuff works anyways. But where we run into problems, that's why there's lawsuits, is that you have to make it clear to that customer that what we put in here is an optional product. It's at your decision as to whether you want it or not. And the sale then is not contingent upon you buying that product or service. As with all aftermarket product sales, we recommend the NADA driven program, voluntary protection products, a model dealership policy. If we need a copy of those, we can send those out as well. But that gives you the NADA stance complete on how to handle pitching and dealing with aftermarket products, value protection products. When you get into a situation where you don't make it clear, you put it in the price of the car, but maybe you don't really tell the customer what the car would cost without it. Then we're into payment packing and UDAP or UDAAP violations. Remember, the customer's in the store to buy a car. And like the FTC executive told me, just tell them how much the damn car costs, not how much the car costs in a hidden service contract. So it is base value of the vehicle, and then clearly identified as what the product is, what it costs, and whether or not it's optional or incidental to the sale has to be handled if you want to do a program where you have pre-packed products in the deal. So let's talk a little bit about menu and process and transparency. I'll turn you back to Bob.
That great job and great information as we're going through that. I was thinking about with most every class that we do, and people call on the phone, and we talk about some of these names of the acts like Graham Leach, Bliley, Dodd-Frank, whatever, and now Monroney, and where do these things come from? And most of them really come from politicians. You know, Monroney, I had to check on this, but that thing has been around since 1958. What the Automotive Information Sales Act, now called the Monroney Act, but that was named, is that an 8? I guess it is, 1958, named after Oklahoma Senator Mike Monroney. It's jokingly said, but who knows, maybe it's true. The Monroney label came in 1958, but some enterprising dealer invented the Addendum Sticker in 1959, and therein lies the problem. So we'll see what happens with that. Great information. Let's go back to the best practice, BVO, base vehicle only, and vehicle is offered. I want to make sure we're on the same page with this to answer questions down the road or people that we might be able to talk to today. If the customer has said yes to the preloads and they're signing something up front, whether it be a buyer's order or the addendum sticker or whatever, to indicate that they want those products and services, now when I get into the menu process, in transparency, my base payment, if they've said yes to those products, my base payment is now going to be not just the vehicle only, but also the products that are included that they've said yes to. And then when I sell my other 3, 4, or 5 products or services, that will be added on from a transparency standpoint if they say yes to those products. Am I saying that correctly?
That is correct. When your base payment, when you're coming from the buyer's order to where we're going to get down and commit the deal to paper, anything that has been included in the sales process beyond the price of the car has to be identified. And when we say this is the payment, it's based on the vehicle and whatever's been added to it. And then if you're really good F&I manager, like Bob said, you just sell 4 or 5 more products, then you have to account for those products. But it has to be clear to the customer that whatever is put on that car beyond what's on that Monroney sticker was voluntarily put on there. There is no dealer requirement. If the dealer requires it, then he has to say it. And there are situations where a dealer may, in Alaska, require certain things on the car. But when I look at that window sticker and that addendum sticker, I have to know what I'm paying for the car relative to what the dealer says the car is going to cost with all of those items in there, or what the car cost and what the price would be of other ancillary products that I want to put on the car. And then if that's all in the negotiation standpoint, when we go to F&I and we get into F&I presentations, then they're obviously, when they have a base payment, it could include the products if they were already sold and agreed to, or could just be the selling price of the car. The F&I manager then does his thing and adds on whatever else he can sell the customer.
Thanks, Dave. Great stuff. You know, I forgot to mention earlier, just from a standpoint of protection for all of us involved here, the disclaimer. And you know this because we know many of you that have called in and are part of our webinar today, because some of you have been a part of all 8 of our webinars. But as you know, Dave and I are not attorneys. We certainly don't pretend to be. So nothing that we say, give, or show you today in any way is intended as legal advice. It's simply to help you look at, evaluate, and if necessary, perhaps improve the effectiveness of your business policies, your business practices. Heard Dave say many times, you know, when it comes to compliance, there's really only 3 people or entities that you should look to really be able to tell you if what you're doing is compliant or non-compliant. And number 1, of course, is not just an attorney, but a qualified attorney. Key word being qualified. Number 2 would be a judge. And as I always say, well, if a judge is telling you that, maybe something bad has already happened. But number 3 is to talk to the appropriate state or federal regulatory agency to get your answer to that. Dave, let me ask you with this. Now, with our current legal climate and even over the past years, what gets us in trouble, I think many times, correct me if I'm wrong, is from a misleading standpoint, and maybe it's intentional, maybe it's not. A customer will look at that on the window, side by side, underneath, whatever, and think that it's really part of the Monroney. Am I correct?
Well, that's why, you know, the term, I probably shouldn't say this, it's trying to be a little bit pregnant in the car dealership. In other words, it really is a optional product, but I really, you know, I don't really want to say that. So where you're going to be tested in court on the addendum is your statement as it relates to if it's required or it's optional, meets the standards of clarity and completeness, where anybody, a child of 9, could look at that sticker and know that what you're trying to sell them on that addendum is either required and you're going to let the deal go down the tubes if they don't agree to it, or it's totally optional. But you cannot get creative with the wording. It has to be clear to a reasonably prudent person whether it's required or it's optional, and it has to be on that addendum sticker and identified properly.
Great. I would say to you, not only just a child of 9, but maybe somebody like me, much older, just turned 76. So I have trouble with those things as well. Recommendation, change color, change the size, and change the font. Would you agree?
Yes.
Would you agree? All right.
But
BVO.
before you go any further, color, size, and all of that's great. It's the verbiage that's going to get you in trouble.
Words matter.
And it's not 5-point type. It is clear to the consumer, and it's tested in court. Remember, when you get into court, I do a lot of these cases, and we have a jury sitting there. We have to do something where the people on the jury would say, yep, you know what? If I walked in that store and I saw that addendum, I would think the dealer was doing what he purports to do.
Dave, great job. So again, the answer is yes. The key is the how we do it. Good job. All right, next slide as I try to negotiate that. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. Erase. That looks good. All right, we're looking at the compliance checklist from AFIP, the vulnerability checklist. It takes less than 5 minutes to complete. I want to start with the safeguards rule, and I'm not going to take the time to read all this information up here, but this is not new stuff. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. There we go. Safeguards has been around since May of 2003. ITPP, the Red Flags program, December 31, 2010. But a lot of stores have not started that, have done it, and a lot of stores that have done it, they've not reviewed it either on an annual or regular basis. So I think there's 15 questions here from the AFIP information that relate to safeguards. So Dave, I want to play the role of an employee at the store, and I'm checking these off. Let's look at maybe just 4 or 5 of them. Does the store have a written information security program in place under the direction of a corporate compliance officer? I'm going to say that's no. 2 down. Are your personnel retrained annually? Well, no, I'm not doing that. A couple more, maybe down here. Have physical or procedural changes concerning where non-public personal information is divulged, recorded, processed, or stored been noted in the updated information security system? Well, probably we haven't updated it. And here's one that's great, I'd like to touch on, and that is still no. Are the required door and desk locks, computer passwords, and hibernation systems operative? The firewalls adequate and operative as well? Dave, could you comment on those for us?
Let's start with number 1. The federal government says to comply with this regulation, you have to have a designated corporate compliance officer and a written program, information security program. And what the government is saying is that you have to protect the information given your dealership by consumers and customers from being stolen out of your store or compromised as it relates to a firewall. So you have an obligation under federal requirements to protect the information given to you by consumers and customers, non-public personal information. Now, what's public information? Anything I can find out about you legitimately on the internet or in the phone book, if you still have one, is public information. Everything else is not. And if you don't have a program in place, then you're in violation of this safeguards rule. Now, let me tell you a little bit about how the world really works. Not too long ago, I gave a talk in Idaho Auto Dealers Association. And I talked about high gross and marks on the board. But I wasn't talking about car dealerships. I'm talking about agents who want to get promoted if they work for the federal government. And they get promoted by the same standard. How many dealers did I call on? And how much did I generate in fines to that dealership? Everybody is after high gross and marks on the board. Now, here's the big problem with this. Putting this program in place is not expensive and it's not disruptive. But there are federal penalties if you're found not in compliance. But here's the killer. If the word gets out that somebody's non-public personal information was compromised in your store, it kills floor traffic. Nobody is going to come into a dealership if they give their name and their personal information and it gets compromised. It is a simple, easily implemented program, and it's just not one that's worth getting caught short.
All right, my scribble on the right says, how about the DMS as part of this, and it gets hacked? Many people have said that that's probably the worst thing that can happen to you. And the reason why it goes that's true is because, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, the privacy notice that we give out, and that goes back to what, 2001. The privacy notice says that we're doing what? We're doing this.
You've made an affirmation to the customer with that notice that you're protecting their information. How do we know?
So in reality, when that happens, everybody that's part of my DMS could become part of that class action lawsuit.
It could, yes.
From an attorney standpoint. That would put 1 or 2 dealers out of business.
Well, more than a few. Now, here's the problem. At a store where they put a photocopy machine on the showroom floor to photocopy driver's licenses and insurance cards. And to make it handy, they put a shelf on top of it. So when they photocopied them, they put the paper on the shelf. I went in there was about 600 copies of driver's licenses and insurance cards sitting out in that showroom on that shelf. So we're not talking about dealers that want to be unscrupulous or not do things right. It was just a silly oversight. But if a customer would have walked in that store and taken that information off that shelf and sold it, he could come back and buy a pretty good used car. Bob?
Very good. Well, let's see. Let's get rid of these, the red, and go to the next slide. And there we go. Disposal rule. Interesting thing about the disposal rule is really part of the FCRA. Disposal rule is part of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. But I want to talk about two of the, four questions there. Dave, does the store have a written policy for disposing of non-public personal information recorded on paper or stored electronically that is updated periodically, abided by, and monitored? And then whether they have that or not, maybe they're trying to do this. Okay, so this might be somewhere in here as far as an answer. But if a document destruction / shredding service is employed, did the vetting process, that's the key, did the vetting process satisfy the standards imposed by the disposal rule? Can you touch on disposal for us?
Yes, what the regulation is saying, not only do you have to have it, but you have to follow specific steps if you hire a document destruction company. In other words, the regulation not only tells you must do it, it tells you what you have to do to satisfy it. And so it gives you a set of standards that you have to apply to any company you're looking at to come in and do your shredding. Are you part of an association? Have you checked with various other sources to see that they are what they say they are? Do they have written processes? So the rule not only says you have to do it, they're going to tell you what you need to do it right. Bob?
Okay, Dave, let's jump to the red flags rule. Been around, what's our date on that? The 12/31, December 31, 2010. Should have been in compliance with this with the written ITPP. You know, I had a call. I know you get these calls regularly. Mine was about 2 weeks ago or so. I got a call and it starts out with, Bob, let me ask you, what do you know about the red flags rule? That's like saying, Bob, what do you think about the Cowboys? What do you think about the weather, whatever? Where do you go with that? What do you know about the red flags rule? So when I got into it and talked to somebody, I found out that maybe there was an identity theft thing going on. I think it was a respected driver's license, didn't know very much. But the most important thing I found out is they didn't have anything in writing. Okay, they had no compliance officer, and you know they're looking to me or us, whatever, to point them in a direction to move the vehicle, whatever. And that answer is not coming from me, quite frankly. I don't think it's coming from you. That's back to the qualified attorney. That's to the judge. That's the appropriate regulatory source. Or for the standpoint of putting the policy together, a program like the AFIP program as it relates to dealer A. But most of those calls I get start out either that way, or they start out, well, Bob, let me ask you, what would happen if? Or Bob, what could happen if? And I find out about 30 seconds into the conversation, it already happened. So, you know, what are you going to learn from that? But that's just part of the industry that we're in. But let's address a couple of these from a red flag standpoint. I don't have it. A written ITPP under the direction of a corporate compliance officer. Secondly, with that, if you didn't have it, and this is a requirement, the board of directors has to sign off on it and receive periodic updates. And then if you have that and doing it correctly, the corporate compliance officer has to deliver an annual report to the board or dealer principal. So if you would talk about that, and then let's talk about these last 5 down here at the bottom. Did the store experience an attempted identity theft during the past 12 months? I'm going to say that's yes. Kind of like my phone call. Was the store a victim of identity thefts during the past 12 months? I don't know what that answer was. Let's say that answer was yes as well. But then the next 3 was the incident properly documented and reported. Ain't no way that happened. Was the vehicle recovered? Let's just say that it wasn't. And last but not least, were changes made in your program in light of the incident or incidents? Dave, take us through red flags if you would.
All right, here's the difference. The safeguards rule, you're dealing with amateurs. A customer sees some information laying around, or a disgruntled employee walks out of there with some information. When you're dealing with the red flags rule, now you're dealing with professionals, people that are coming in there and buying vehicles under false identities. I was in Colorado recently. A group went through the Front Range dealers. They got out of there with 7 cars on stolen identity, and nobody got caught. And they weren't stealing Kias, it was Lexus or better. Now, why do you have to have a corporate compliance officer and a board of directors sign off on red flags? What the government has said is that when these occur where we have a problem, we want somebody by name to blame. We don't want to be running around the dealership looking for somebody who was supposed to have been in charge of that. So the government builds into these regulations standards where when something bad happens, we know exactly who to talk to and to hold accountable for that. And on the red flags rule, when it says the board of directors, that pretty much says everybody. But the core of this thing is that you're dealing with professionals. And that's the problem. So we get into how do we manage this program? What do we do? And we'll talk a little bit about what you can do to keep yourself from becoming a victim of identity theft. Should we talk about it now?
Yeah, please do.
All right, the first thing you do is you make sure you get all the information you can from the customer. Get a fully completed credit app. The more information you can collect from that customer, the easier it is to triangulate that information against what's on the credit app, the callback report, the driver's license, and the insurance card. If I found Bob's wallet and he had his Social Security card in there, I could come into your store and buy a car on a 5-liner. The second one, and this is the crucial step, almost every one of these identity thefts are a product of extenuating or mitigating circumstances. The customer comes in and throws the F&I person way off his game. I'll give you a couple quick examples. It was a Saturday, a rural store closed at noon. A guy shows up at about 11:45 in a beat-to-heck pickup. And he goes straight to the F&I manager. And he said, "This is my brother's pickup. He worked construction. He fell off a scaffold and broke his back. He can never physically work construction again. In fact, he's home recuperating. But we think we found him a job in a major construction company 2 states away working in a home office. But he has to be there Monday morning for an interview. And that old pickup out front ain't going to make it to that state and back. So I don't care what you do. I'm not going to argue on the price of the truck, the APR, let it go. Anything we can do to get my brother on the road, I'm willing to do. He's got a wife and 3 kids and no income. Would you help me help my brother?" That F&I manager moved heaven and earth. And guess what? There was no brother and there is no truck. We have a client that's lost 2 Bentley Continentals to identity theft. These people are really good. So if you're in a working F&I and you get into a situation where somebody wants you to trade the cow for the magic beans, we're in a Jack and the Beanstalk deal, the first thing you do is get another set of eyes on it, get a manager involved. Let's get somebody else to take a look at this deal. Look at it this way. If you do that and it blows up, he goes under the bus first. The last thing is, if you don't feel comfortable with it, don't deliver the car. Yeah. Now, I'm going to give you a little caution here. If you get into situations on IRS 8300 on what's a cash deal or the red flags rule on how do we do this program and start giving advice or get involved with the customer, the first thing that happens when the customer gets caught is he said the F&I manager told me how to do it. He was complicit in what we're doing. But the dealer has to have, and this is one where the world gets really ugly quick, is have a corporate compliance officer and a written identity theft prevention program, and all of which has been blessed by the board of directors formally. Bob?
David, that complicit I always think about when you talk about the definition of complicity, the involvement as an accomplice in a crime or wrongdoing. Red flags rule, going back to this, I remember with the crisis that we had in 08, 09, whatever, maybe 7, close to 10, but the red flags rule really was supposed to become effective in 2008. And because of everything that was going on in our industry, it didn't happen until December 31, 2010. But the thing that I think that really surprised me, it's very true. If you get the red flags rule, and to me the best publication from a working standpoint, if you really want to put it together yourself, your compliance officer, your qualified attorney, get the NADA driven publication on red flags rule, and they'll just kind of step you through on how to do that. But the definition of a red flag is a pattern, practice, or specific activity that indicates the possible existence of identity theft. So they talk about the fact that identity theft doesn't have to really have occurred, but just the possible existence of identity theft that could be in big trouble for you. Would you comment on that, Dave?
Well, I mean, if it's when the car is gone, it doesn't matter what happened. You've already lost the car, probably lost your job, but that's another story. So what we're talking about is controlling the pace of the transaction and gathering the information necessary to, if it's a bona fide deal, to complete it. But if it's not, to ascertain why it doesn't seem right and then work yourself out of it. But when you get into a situation, get somebody else involved, get a manager involved on these situations. It happens all the time. You're dealing with pros and they are really good.
All right, dealer aid solutions. Let's get rid of that. Go to the next slide. There we go. Dave, take us through this. Dealer aid solutions, first step, step two, and how your organization really takes it from there, and what we do for stores, what you do for stores to bring them in line as it relates to these requirements.
All right, we are one of the very first providers of a turnkey information security program. And the first thing, at either safeguards or red flags, is you have to appoint a qualified corporate compliance officer. Now, the problem with these programs is you have plenty of people telling you what you're supposed to do, but not very many people give you the tools to actually do it. And so we go that next step. I mean, you go to any dealer meeting, somebody's up there preaching about what you need to do and telling you war stories or horror stories about somebody that didn't. So we will give you a job description for a corporate compliance officer for red flags and safeguards. And then we will tell them, how do we divide the store? We have secure document workers, people that handle non-public personal information. And we provide job descriptions for every person that has one of those duties. We take a look at anybody that would be impacted by the red flags rule, and we create job descriptions. So we say, this is who should be in charge. This is your identity theft prevention program or information security program. Here are the people you have designated as those impacted by that program. And then we will give you job descriptions for each individual that has a responsibility of that. We will help you walk them through it. This is a deal where you sit down and read a task and they initial it. Yes, I agree to do that. We also provide all kinds of handy signs and aids to make sure that it works right. Let me give you an example. We put a sign in the showroom that says this dealership is in full compliance with effectively the red flags rule. Now, if I'm an identity theft and I walk into that showroom and I see a sign that says, by the way, we have a program designed to catch identity thieves, unless I can't read, I'm probably not going to steal out of that store. We give you information to help you if anything changes. We update our programs periodically. But major dealer groups, hundreds of dealers across the country, are on our program. Bob?
Very good. Let's erase that. Go to the next one. Dave, I think the key is this right here, and you really kind of got into that. But here's the bottom line. When the dark side comes in, among other things, what can we do? Hand it to them. A single hand it to a regulator binder houses all the NPI material in one place. So you think about it from a standpoint of what we've talked about today, so far, with the exception of just the timely topic of the coronavirus and the things that you shared with the cooling off period. We've really talked about, in addition to that, the other number one hot button topic in our industry, being compliance with ethics, F&I and the law, selling with integrity, and the need really for every dealership in America, whether they be RV, marine, power sports, commercial trucking, or auto, to develop it's called a CMS or compliance management system, and the appointment of a compliance officer. Would you comment on that?
Yes, the way we work this is we said we want everything that's relative to those regulations in one spot. So if a regulator comes into your store, you're not going through a filing cabinet or looking for a bulletin you thought you got from the dealer association. But let me tell you about reality. Here in Texas, I got a call on about a Thursday, and they said, by the way, somebody's coming in to do an inspection on my compliance with non-public personal information. They'll be here Friday. I loaded a kit in my car. I drove out there. I figuratively went out the back door of the dealership when the inspector came in the front door. and it was a small store. And incidentally, he drove by some great big stores just to get to a little one. Remember, marks on the board and high gross. I don't have to tell him how big the store was, just that I busted him and I got to make a little bit of money for the government. And when the inspector came in, he said, "Sir, are you in compliance with these regulations?" He handed them the binder. You see the little sign, secure document areas. You see the sign about the red flags rule. There's little tags on the computers that identify secure computers. The point was, he couldn't make any money in that store. Now, if you do nothing for a regulator, when he shows up, you just told him, "I don't think you're very important." And he'll spend about a week in your store telling you how important you are. But let's say a regulator shows up and your plan's not perfect, but you've made a good faith effort to implement it. He may gig you, but often he turns in, if he sees you trying and you recognize the importance of what he's representing, he might work with you versus assess a great big fine. We're all human nature here. If you're really trying to abide by the law and you haven't got it 100%, you know what? I'll help you. If you've done nothing, I'll tell you how important I really am. Bob?
Excellent. Next slide. Here we go. Let's spend a few minutes on the dealership value statement. I noticed that my good friend, Ed Stewart, is joining us this afternoon. Ed, glad you could make it. Ed and I have known each other for the better part of 20 years. Ed is one of the best F&I trainers, one of the best front-end sales trainers that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. Great guy, based here in the Dallas area, but I know he works in dealerships in probably 12 to 15 states right now. Ed was also a pretty darn good football player. You've met Ed Stewart before. He played with Oklahoma back in the days of Barry Switzer. So if you want to really get to Ed on football, talk to him about that. But Ed can probably do a better job with this than I do. This DVS value statement and the fact that this is the DNA of your dealership. We talk about it from an outline standpoint. I want to talk to the customer about the fact that we're a full service dealership. We're both a transportation and service facility and a financial center as well. RHIT, when I put this together, that was before we expanded it. Now I like to refer to it as RHITT. But hey, you're the quarterback, call your own play. Respect, honesty, integrity, transparency, and trust, or the big hitter, honesty, integrity, and transparency. Unique financial package is what we're talking about as our the products that we have, our optional voluntary protection products. That's the term that we use when we introduce the menu that's directly from the NADA, Model Dealership Policy for Voluntary Protection standpoint. Our unique financial package is really kind of threefold. It's very convenient and easy to take advantage of. What that means is this afternoon, you take delivery of your vehicle, you take home with you our financial package as well. Secondly, it's available to almost everyone who likes to purchase from us here at Harkins Motors, just promoted myself. But Dave, the most important reason why we developed this program with our finance sources, quite frankly, is because we care. Dave, we really do. We do things a bit differently here at Harkins Motors. You see, Dave, we care not just about your business today. That's very important to us. But really, we also care about earning your repeat and referral business for the future as well. And because of that, of course, Dave, we care about protecting what? Both your good credit, that is your credit track record, as well as your increasing investment in your purchases as well. So in reality, our unique financial package is designed to protect 5 things. Number 1, of course, would be your family budget. Number 2 would be that good credit, your credit track record. Number 3 would be the increasing investment that you've made in your purchase today. And there's may not be a lot of down payment up front or positive equity, but if you ever have that, that's an investment that they've already made. Any down payment or positive equity. But Dave, even if they don't have that, each and every month, beginning on whatever it is now, 90 days to first payment, as you begin making that payment to Last National Bank, what's really happening to your investment in cash? They will always get that correct. It's going up each and every month as you make that payment. So your personal savings, your investment, and maybe even jeopardizing the automobile itself. But primarily, we care. So the bottom line of this is our unique financial package not only provides you with financial or monetary relief, but also really emotional relief as well. When you think about it, what can be better? What can be better than that? So I was exposed to this concept in the 1990s. Ed was probably exposed to it before that. I will tell you that I know personally hundreds, if not thousands of stores that have adopted something like this. So you can make this a long DBS. A long one I would say is maybe a minute and a half, minute 45, or you can streamline it and do it in 15 or 20 seconds. But I will tell you, it's the little difference that makes the big difference between making money and maximizing your net dollar profit opportunity. So once again, when do we recommend you do that? After you've discussed the manufacturer's limited warranty with your buyer, or in the case of pre-owned, if you have it, the remaining portion of the manufacturer's limited warranty, where you're talking about the things that are not covered under the manufacturer's limited warranty, the tires, the tire and wheel road hazards, the incidentals, the things that are not covered as well, the normal maintenance, the environmental issues, the normal wear and tear. But when you think about it, just because those items aren't covered under the manufacturer's limited warranty doesn't mean they can't be covered. Be happy to tell you more about that a little bit later. So now, unless they ask me a specific question about any of those products or the service contract or the limited warranty, I'm going to roll into the dealership value statement and then get into the menu after that. So it's little differences that make the big difference.
But there's a cornerstone to this, Bob.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask everybody on the call today, how many of you have read and understand all the covenants on an installment sale agreement, consumer lease agreement, service contract? You cannot be honest if you can't give an honest answer. So the first thing you do is read the documents, understand the documents, those documents you're asking the customer to sign. Now, remember, on the help on cooling off period, if you have a concern about your state not being in, that maybe it supersedes federal law or is different than federal law, you have my email address. Send me your name and I will send you, if I have it in my files, the state requirements on cooling off period for your state. AFIP, almost everything we do is reviewed by an attorney. So we don't make this stuff up. We have it vetted before we send it out.
Very good. Let's erase this. Go to the next one. Try to go to the next one. All right, there we go. Before I yield back to John Friedland to wrap this up, and we've gone over our time, but hey, what else do we have to do? I want to talk about just these two things right here. Our last two AGWS University 4-day classes of the year, August 10 to 13 and October 12 to 15. Now there's 4 days there, but it's really 3.5 days. 3.5 days, because you come in on a Sunday night, or fly in Monday morning. So it's all day Monday, it's all day Tuesday, it's all day Wednesday, and a half day on Thursday. We're done at noon on Thursday. Our change, we're very excited about this, and quite frankly, this was by request. So we're going to see how this goes. It's up to you folks, and we invite you to take advantage of it. Instead of it just being how we've done it before, the 3.5 days, for Monday and Tuesday morning, if I can spell it, of those two classes is going to be the AFIP certification process. So Dave and his team will be with us. It might be online, the way that we're doing it now, or it might be with us in person, hopefully in Warrenville as well. But all day Monday will be like the modified boot camp, and then the testing, the tests will be done on Tuesday morning. So that's the compliance and ethics part of that 3.5 day workshop. Now the F&I Sales Workshop will begin Tuesday afternoon, all day Wednesday, and a half day Thursday, and that's when myself and 3 other instructors get involved with that. Many of you know who those people are. Chuck Hobbs, also Blake Peters, and also Jack Severance, as we get into the product's presentation, the product's descriptions, the product knowledge, the menu sale, value-added objection handling, and just doing the model leadership policy for voluntary protection products. Okay, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, one quick thing, Bob. On the Monday and Tuesday, the Association of Finance and Insurance Professionals is a non-public corporation that's designed to certify F&I managers, captive lenders, aftermarket product personnel to the state and federal regulations. Now, when we talk about everything we do is live. Now, we might come in live on your computer screen, or we'll be in person live. But everything we do is live interactive instruction where we have classroom participation. We give a proctored final exam. You get a diploma, but you get a professional designation. When we started AFIP, one of the things we said, and we mean this sincerely, is that we turned F&I into a profession.
Very good. I'm going to play with this one more time as we're getting this done. Change the color. Everybody's probably concerned about, well, what's the cost? What's the investment? Let me put this down. I'm going to do it in two ways. Our 3-day class at Warrenville, and this is for our agent partners and dealer clients, not just them, but anybody involved in the industry that wants to come to class. At almost every class, we have people come that are really not AGWS clients. So it's available. $595 is what that class was, and that includes the hotel and meals, except for dinner and that kind of thing. But because of our work with AFIP, and now it's referred to as the AGWSU/AFIP offerings with the dealer aid solution and that kind of thing, AFIP certification now is another $595. So I'm not real good with numbers, but that would be what, 1,190 or 1,190. For a combination of both for the 3.5 days. So what that means is people can come on just the AFIP days, be certified with that, $595, get back to reality, and people stay for the rest of the class, whatever. Or people might be AFIP certified, so no need to be there Monday, Tuesday. They come in Tuesday morning, join us with class, and they're there Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday and a half day, Thursday, and Chuck, myself, and other instructors will have them, and that would be the $595 that they would pay. So Dave, we're really excited about that. Any other word on that you want to say with respect to AFIP certification?
What we do is we combine knowledge with personal accountability, and it works. We've done this for almost 30 years, and we have a great track record. AFIP certified people don't get their dealer in trouble. Bob?
John Friedland, before I yield back to you, just remember, ladies and gentlemen, everything that we do is designed to help you maximize deal profit. Dave, you know what we're about to say. Meaning both front-end gross and finance and insurance income, both fixed and variable operations, but to do so in a manner that's consistent with good customer relations and sound business practices. So from a value standpoint, with our company, the American Guardian Group of Companies, we endorse and teach the industry standards that are recommended by NADA, the National Automobile Dealers Association, by AFIP, the Association of Finance and Insurance Professionals, and last but certainly not least, our internal American Guardian Group of Companies Seller Code of Conduct for retail sales. And everybody signs off on that as well. With that, Mr. Friedland, thank you, sir. We're back to you.
All right, thank you, Bob, and thank you, Dave. Appreciate everyone attending today. As you can see, the class schedule, the next webinar is May 13th, so keep an eye out in your emails for that registration. And if you have any questions on this, please feel free to email B. Harkins, BHARKINS, @agwsinc.com, and we'll be able to get back to you with any questions we weren't able to answer today. We also have a LinkedIn page, if you wanted to go to the next slide. And on LinkedIn, you can follow and share anything you see there. Webinars are also promoted there as well. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, everybody. Be safe and let's get this business back to reality again. Thank you, Dave Robertson, for your information and insights.
Time to mask up.
Mask up.